Hello, welcome to the Crafting Shares. I'm Ruth from Beltane Gifts, and today I'm going to show you how to make one of these, which is a needle felted flower. Now this is a really simple project, and it's something that I would take to a workshop if I was teaching 30 plus people who'd never felted before, and they would all get it done within 45 minutes. So if you've never needle felted, you've never picked up a needle felting needle, but you want to give it a go, this is the perfect project for you to try. Now the reason I'm doing this one as well today is because I want to make a needle felted Easter wreath, and I thought it'd be quite nice to use the flowers to kind of bulk out the outside edge of it. Also, they can be given just as gifts individually as well, so I'm going to be showing you how to actually sew on a brooch back to this so that you can just give it as a gift if you want. I know Mother's Day is coming up soon, so it's a lovely addition for somebody to wear either on their coat or on a bag, however they want to wear it. So I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to catch future videos, be sure to click on that subscribe button and the bell icon. And any questions, anything you'd like to see me do in the future, be sure to pop it down there in the comment section. I love to hear from you guys. The trickiest thing to do is to make the felt flowers that we're going to be felting together. Now I make the flowers themselves out of acrylic felt because it's cheap and easy to get hold of, and it's nice and simple to cut. I normally have these pre-made for people, and then all they have to do is felt the different pieces together, but I thought, seeing as you're at home and I can't give you the flowers, I can show you how I made them so that you can make your own. So here's some that I've drawn out previously. This is just on card and just as a template, but if you wanted to make your own template, it's ever so simple. So I have got a ruler and pencil here. Now I have three different sized flowers here. One is 6 centimeters from tip to tip, one is 5 centimeters, and one is 4 centimeters. Now if you only wanted 2 petals, I would probably go for the 4 and the 6. If you wanted to go for 3, it's nice to have all 3. If you wanted to have a more petally flower, then definitely go for 3. So I will show you how to do one, and the same technique is for all of them. What you do is, with your ruler, I'm just going to make a little notch at 0 and a notch at 6, and then I'm going to draw a line between the two of them. I'm going to do a little line at 3, so that's the center, and then I'm going to do a little line at 2 and 4. Okay, so we should have a line with 5 little notches on it. Then we're going to go at a right angle. If you've got a set square, then you can use that. I'm just going to kind of guess. So in that central notch that we made, I'm just going to put the ruler at the 3. I'm then going to put a little notch at the 0 and the 6, and again at the 4 and the 2. Draw a little line between them. There we go. Then I'm going to go in between these two lines, try and get the centre if you can. Again, put your ruler at the 3, little notch at the 0, little notch at the 6, also notches at the 4 and the 2, and we're going to join them up. And then exactly the same in between the other two pieces. Okay, so you should end up with one of these, which is an 8-pointed star shape. Now where you've done your notches at the 2 and the 4, just going to join them together with little curves so that we're basically just drawing a bit of a circle there in the center. Now this is going to be the center for your, now for each of your lines at the end, what we want to do is kind of midway between each section, just doing a little line. If you want to, you can measure this out with a ruler, but you don't need to. What we're going to do is, from the point, we're going to draw a bit of an arc, and we're going to rotate, and we're going to do the same for each of them, and then same on the opposite side. There we go. Now this is really basic. You can have a play about with it and just get it exactly how you want it before you cut it out. If you want your petals to be a bit bigger, just make the curve at the top a bit wider. But the trick is to get them to stop at this point here, so that you've got all the petals ending midway between the two lines and a centimetre out from the centre. Now the reason we're doing this is because we want to leave that section here the same for each of our flowers. So for each of my flowers I've got 2 centimeters in the center for each of them, no matter how big the flower, so that when we put the petals together, the centers are going to match up and it gives us a nice surface area to do our felting onto. Now, the only difference between doing this and doing the smaller flowers is that you put your ruler in a different place. So for the 5 centimeter one, instead of having your central point on the 3, it's on the 2.5, and you just stop at the 0 and the 5. And for the 4 centimeter one, it's the 0 and the 4, and you have marks at 1 and 3 and your central point at 2. So it takes a little while to get your head around it, but once you do, you can make your flowers as big as you want to, make your petals as long as you want to. So once you've got your templates, it's time to cut them out. Okay, so these are all cut out, ready to go. What we need to do now is grab some acrylic felt. Now, this is all I've got handy, so this isn't what I will be felting, but this is just so you can see what I'm doing. So in this case, I've got a white piece of felt. You can either, if you want to, use a pen and just draw around your template first and then cut it out, or you can hold it and cut it out as you go. Drawing round is a bit more precise. The only thing is to make sure that you turn over your piece of felt when you're felting it, so that the drawn on side is downwards so that you don't see it, just because you don't want the pen marks showing. So I'm just going to hold it in place and cut. As I say, not the best way, but still. If you do it this way, then just go and take a little bit of extra time and just trim the ends of the petals and just get them so they're a bit more uniform. There we go. And then you would do exactly the same with your different sized petals as well, just so that you've got a set. And if I show you with the cardboard here, this is how we'd be creating our flower. And this is why we did the equally spaced lines, so that you can just rotate them ever so slightly so that you have your petals offset so that they're in between, and your centers should line up to give us a nice area for felting. Okay, so here's some that I've cut out previously. They're not quite as precise as I would like, but they will do for a demonstration. These were made before I worked out my template properly. As I say, you get the idea. We're also going to be using our felting pad today, which we're going to put our petals onto. We're going to be using some yellow roving. You can use whatever colour you want for the centre. I quite like the yellow, so we're going to be using some yellow today. We've got our felting needles. We've got our medium length generic felting needle, and we've also got a short fine felting needle. This one's a gauged 38 star needle. You don't need to use the gauged ones. The just generic felting needle will do. Go, and finger protectors, just because we're going to be holding on to our work and we don't want to get stabbed. Okay, so first step is to take our roving here, and we're just going to pull it apart and make it nice and messy. So what I'm going to do is just place it in the centre of my flowers, and I'm going to try the green needle first, my small needle first, just to see if this is big enough. Yeah, I think that will work. Now, as I'm working through acrylic felt, you will sometimes find that it's tough to get your needle through, especially as I'm using 3 layers. So if you use a finer needle, it's easier for it to go through. It might just take a little while longer for you to actually felt the fibre. Just take it slow, try it out, and if you find that your needle doesn't want to go through, don't force it, just try using a finer needle instead. I've done a few stabs just to secure the centre, and what I'm going to do is just with my thumb, which is covered, I'm just going to pull up the fibre a little bit, and I'm going to stab around in that circle. So if you remember our template, we've got our centimetre circle. That's going to be the diameter of our flower centre. So I'm going to stab around, little stabs at 45-degree angle, always pointing towards the centre of our flower. Not putting any sideways pressure onto the needle, we don't want to break it. And we're just going to pull it off and rotate it, and just keep stabbing inwards, just catching these fibres. If you notice, I'm stabbing just inside, so there's loose fibre here, I'm stabbing just a bit inwards. And the reason I'm doing that is because as I stab, it's going to catch the fibre and tuck it in and under, and we want to keep going until we come back to where we started. Okay, so I'm back to where I started, and if you have a look, you can see there that it's kind of attached. If I turn it over, you can also see that there's some fibre coming through. Now we want this fibre to come through, because acrylic felt, it doesn't have the scales that sheep's wool does, so you can't felt it, not in the traditional sense. What you can do though is push the fibres through so that it holds the layers together. And what we're going to do once we've fully felted the centre is, if you want to, you can turn it into a brooch by gluing on a piece of acrylic felt and then sewing it into place. And when you add the glue to the fluffy bits here, what happens is it will lock everything into place and stop it from ever falling apart. But we need to finish felting our centre first. So we've done our first round. What I'm going to do now, keeping that 45-degree angle, I'm just going to catch some of these loose fibres and I'm just felting just a little bit higher, so up to about here, still stabbing it in and working my way round. And we've got lots of loose fibre up at the top for us to shape. This is just to make sure everything's nice and firm and gives us a base to work on. Now this is one of the few projects where we actually want to be stabbing into the bag below, and that's just because we want to make sure that we're pushing all those fibres through all those layers of felt. We want to get that fibre through. There we go. Okay, so we've got our bits here. Don't worry that it's larger in diameter than the centre we want it to be, because we can tuck those in a minute, but I want to start felting in some of this stuff at the top. Now what we're creating is a dome. We have to imagine that there is a point right in the centre, so if you imagine in our template that point there where all of our lines meet, that's in the centre here, and that's where our needle needs to be constantly pointing towards. So if I'm stabbing from the side, I would be stabbing with my needle pointing inwards towards that point, and as I move my needle up to the top, see, I'm stabbing straight down towards that point. So what we want to do is change our angle as we work our way round, and you see how that angle's changing. It's going from sideways all the way to straight on top, and what that does is that creates that curved shape that we want to create. So I'm starting here at the bottom and I'm just bringing my needle up as I get towards the top, and I'm always working my way up towards the top. I'm not bringing it down. What I want to do is bring all this fibre up to the centre and then just flatten it down there. Now I'm rotating the flower as I work, just because I'm right-handed and it's easier for me to felt from right to left, and it's also easier having it this way for me to see what's going on. I could felt from here, but then I wouldn't be able to see the shape I'm creating, so it's better to rotate your work than it is to stab at a weird angle. Also, doing it this way means that when you're stabbing you've got more control and you're lifting up your work so it's not getting felted into the cushion, because we don't want to have to cut it off later. Okay, so now I've done a complete rotation. What I'm going to do now is just look at bits that are sticking out more than others, and I'm still changing my angle so that I'm rounding things off as I go. And we've still got some lumps and things. I can just aim for those individually. Again, still changing the angle of my needle, and we've got the outside edge here that's wider than I want it to be. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to lightly hold on to it with finger and thumb. Make sure you're wearing your finger protectors for this. And I'm just going to catch these fibres and I'm stabbing. If you can see, what I'm aiming to do is I don't want to stab into the acrylic felt here, I want to stab into it further back. So I'm just catching the fibres and just slowly just giving them a couple of stabs up and under. So you see how that's been pushed back? I'm going to work my way round, just catching those fibres and just stabbing them in where I want them. Now take this really slow. You'll find the slower you do this, the more fibres you'll catch and the more it'll felt into place, which is what we want, and you get more control the slower you go. Okay, so that's brought our edges in, and I'm just going to go over the whole of the dome again just to bring it down, because it's a bit bigger than I want it and there's still lots of squishiness to it. So again, taking it really slow, stabbing quite deeply. Now there you go. So have a look. You can give it a little bit of rub between finger and thumb to get rid of any of the holes if you don't want to see those. Any bits that you see that are sticking up that you don't want, you can give those a stab. Go. You can see we've still got some fibres out the other side, which is great. Now what I quite like to do is just have a bit of a stab at the acrylic felt and I just like to stab just in the centre of the petals. It's not really felting it, it's just pushing things in a bit, but I like to give it a little bit of a stab just because, I'm not sure if you can see that, it's just bringing the petals up just a touch, and I quite like that just to give the flower a bit more dimension. So we've got our flower and our centre done. Now what we would do, if you wanted to, turn it into a brooch. So to do that, turn it over. I've pre-cut out some little hearts, again out of acrylic felt, and what you need is a needle and thread, preferably in the same colour as your backing. Okay, so we've got our needle and thread. What we're going to do is we're going to get a brooch back, and it's always best to sew the brooch back on first, just because once you've added your glue, everything starts to set and it's a nightmare to get the needle through. So we're going to get our brooch back, we're going to hold it onto our heart, and I don't put a knot into my threads, it's just not something I do, so instead I'm just going to sew through, leave a little tail on the back, I'm holding onto that, and I'm just going to do a few little stitches through the same hole. There we go, just to secure it, and then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same again on the other side. Sorry, it's very cold in here, I can't actually feel my fingers at the minute, so I'm trying to be as neat as possible. Then just going to do the other holes as well. There we go. Now I'm not going to cut this thread off, I'm going to leave it there on the heart for the time being because we need to sew it onto the back of our brooch. I have managed to find some glue, so I've got some Mod Podge here. Now you don't have to use Mod Podge, you can use acrylic glue instead if you want. This is just what I've got handy. I haven't got a brush, but I have got lots of pieces of wood, so I'm going to be using one of these. I'm going to pop it onto the heart. You want to make sure that it's nice and coated there, so I'm just making sure it's fully covered. Now you could, if you wanted to, just sew the heart straight onto the back of your flower. The reason that I'm putting the glue on is because once the glue soaks in and then sets, you find it goes a bit like cardboard, so it makes it nice and solid, and it just makes it so much nicer once it's finished. So decide if your flower's got a way up you want it. I think it's about the same both ways, so I'm going to have it that way. Pop your little heart glue side down over the centre, so make sure it's fully covering the bit you felted through. Then just carefully press down with your fingers just so that the glue starts to do its thing. So you need to make sure that you sew everything together before your glue sets. If you do it afterwards, it is like having to try and sew through cardboard, and it's no fun whatsoever. So there we go, make sure you've got your heart in place. I'm just going to use my thumb to hold it down, and then I'm going to do some little stitches, just some really small stitches. We don't want them really to show, and we don't want to stab too deep. We just want to go through this layer of felt flower. We don't want to go all the way through because you don't want your stitches to show on the front. And try and get your stitches as neat as you can, nice and close together. And I'm just going to work my way all the way around the outside until, make sure it's not showing, until the heart is fully sewn in place. Okay, so I've finished sewing around the outside. Don't worry that it's discoloured because of the glue. Once that dries, you're not going to notice it. Plus it's on the back, so you're not going to look at that. So once you've finished your stitches, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to sew through and come out the other side, and then with my scissors I'm just going to cut as close to the thread as possible. There we go, and we're done. So there's our back of the brooch. Sorry, I'm stuck to the cotton. There we go, so there's the back of our brooch, and there's the front, ready to be worn or to add to your wreath. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely week, stay safe, stay warm, and I will see you next time. Bye.